Hey, everybody. Welcome to another San Antonio Tech Dad podcast. It's Alan and Drew and Corey. We're back again for the second time in 2 weeks, which is great.
Feels
It's
too
great
soon.
it's too soon. We can hang up and come back in 6 months if you guys want. But we're already here. Let's do this thing.
We have a quota,
Why not?
ladies and gentlemen. We have a
We
quota.
do. We do, and we have to knock out all the remaining weeks of the year to meet it. So yeah, let's do this. Let's jump in and talk. So, how are you guys doing?
Not too shabby. Not too shabby. Enjoying a little bit of a red label, ladies and gentlemen. Love that Johnny Walker red label. I think that we're doing a whiskey night tonight, like a Scotch whiskey night tonight. I don't know what you guys are drinking. We've talked about a little bit of it, but what you guys got? What you guys got in the glass?
In the previous episode, we discussed a thing, and that thing is an infinity bottle.
Oh, we did.
I have achieved an infinity bottle. I have this lovely decanter.
Yeah.
I have a very full infinity bottle.
But right, so like, can I show my infinity bottle? So this is my infinity bottle. It's a skull. It's a tequila skull. It's not nearly as full as Drew's. Not even close. Even Alan's.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at a maybe a glass and a half in there, and you guys.
I feel Drew cheated and took all the last of his whiskey and scotches and whatever that he didn't get to drink, and was like, "Oh, what am I going to do with this bottle? I'm going to put this in the infinity bottle." And I'm like, "Really?" Pro mode.
So I have a strategy.
Okay, what's the strategy?
Is to bring a bottle when you are on a family vacation or something along those lines, or you're meeting up with other family, because I've got a father-in-law and a brother-in-law who are happy to share a bottle with me. And I make sure that it is widely known that that last pour is for the infinity bottle. And so I may come home from a vacation with an extra pour for my infinity bottle every time I go on a long weekend or something along those lines. And so that is how I've been able to achieve a fuller infinity bottle. I have not been making that kind of a dent in my collection. I have been utilizing the well, if I have a bottle that's close, I'll work on that bottle until I get it into the infinity bottle. So that's the other thing. I don't want to leave a big air gap in a bottle that I've had sitting around for a while. Oxidation's no good. So that's one of the other reasons, because I don't want to leave.
You have to make.
I have an image of like
here, there's all this air, but if you put it up here, the skinny neck,
not much air,
not as much oxygen.
So I have an image.
Science.
I have an image of Drew running around with his infinity bottle, and he's like, he opens it up, and he's all like, hey, last drop. It goes in here. Hey, you put that in here. Don't you drink it. Don't you drink it. You put it in here. Yeah. Okay, good.
That is incredibly accurate.
That
is incredibly accurate.
I feel that is Drew getting that infinity bottle filled, sir. But cheers to you, sir. I'm excited to see what's going to evolve into at this point.
Also, pro tip: it's a pretty decent gauge on the top there. Makes it a lot easier to pour a bottle in.
Most def. Excellent choice of container, by the way. So, what are you drinking tonight, Drew?
Oh, I'm having my infinity bottle, and
come on. How is it?
He's running out of room. He's got to make some more room.
He's got to make room. He's got to like drink it down so he can put more shots into it. Got it.
Well,
yeah.
So I hadn't really tasted it until tonight. So
you didn't evolve. So you haven't been tasting it in the process. You have legitimately waited until this point to taste it. So it's become a whole different animal.
And I've learned something.
Okay.
It's mostly American whiskey. I wasn't paying as much attention to what was going in it and thinking about like how they all differ. But it's either rye or bourbon, and the flavor definitely reflects that.
So you get the spice, you get the kickback. That's actually really interesting. That the preference has changed. I feel that you need to. Your next couple shots should be something Irish, and Islay. I don't know how to pronounce it. An Islay. Yeah. Get an Islay. Get something peaty in there to evolve it a little bit. Maybe get a couple. Come on.
No, there's a time and a place for Lafroig or a Lagavulin. I can't afford a Lagavulin.
Agreed. Don't even do that. Do a Glenmorangie, and add a little flavor into that. I think
I do need some more scotch. So the only thing in there that's not American is I have an Akasi that was a Japanese whiskey.
Yeah.
But it's going to get buried pretty quickly because they're pretty light.
If you're going that heavy American, you're pretty much going to kill that flavor.
A rye is going to just bulldoze a Japanese whiskey. So you can't tell that there's a Japanese whiskey in there. And it was one of the first ones to go in. So there's a lot of single barrel. I really like Four Roses. So there's a couple of single barrel Four Roses in there, a small batch and a single barrel. And then.
So I'm interested about the evolution now because you now have an American bourbon mix. I feel that
American whiskey. So I've got like a George Dickel in there. So that's Tennessee whiskey.
Yep.
2 or 3 bourbons, a couple of ryes. The bourbon's kind of pronounced, but it would probably be a rye forward bourbon. If you tried it blind and was just trying to figure out what it was you're drinking, you'd probably think that the malt bill is pretty heavy on the rye.
But that's kind of the point of the Infinity bottle, right? That we can, as we drink and as our choices in drinks and as our preferences in drinks change over time, so does that bottle. It's a cumulative marriage of all of the different whiskeys that we've had over, however long we run it.
Well, that's the point, right? This is right now. I think that's interesting because you have this American whiskey, you have this bourbon barrel right now in your bottle. But in the next couple months, that could change depending on your taste. You may be like, hey, I already have that in here, or I don't want to put any more of that in here. And you go either more peaty and more Scottish, more Irish, or you go the Japanese route and you get a lot of sweeter whiskeys out there and these malts out there. And you evolve it. And I think that's the point of the Infinity Bottle. I agree with Alan on that one, is that it becomes something that you are based off of taste at that point in time. And then evolves across your taste palette.
Yeah, I've got a little bit of Old Pulteney 12, I think. That's probably the next to go in. So that'll add a little bit of the Scotch seaside flavor and hopefully add some depth to what we're doing.
Some salt is really what you want. You want salt.
So the way I got into whiskey was through Weller Antique. And you can't find Weller Antique anywhere anymore. But I do have some of the Weller Special Reserve, which is a 7-year bourbon. And as I've had a wider variety of whiskeys, I've really found kind of a salted caramel flavor in that whiskey that I'd never really found before. And I'm curious to see how it would evolve because it's a wheated whiskey. It's not really got the same flavor profile that a lot of bourbons have. And that wheat gives it kind of a sweet, round caramel flavor, but I really get a salted caramel flavor for some reason from that whiskey these days. So I'm curious to see if adding that in would liven up the flavors, because that's what salt really does, is it combines with flavors in a unique way to bring out something that might have already been there but was more muted. You'll find a lot of times at like a wine tasting, they'll have you taste the wine, have a bit of salt, taste the wine again, and that opens up a lot of the flavors that were there that you may not have caught the first time. And so I don't know that Weller is necessarily as briny as Old Pulteney, but we'll see. I think it'll be delicious. Anyhow, hey Alan, you're drinking something.
I am. I'm drinking some Four Roses bourbon.
I approve of Four Roses.
So you stuck local, yes?
Yeah, fairly local. I mean, I'm not sure exactly where. It's a Texas bourbon, right? And it's Kentucky.
Yeah, is it Kentucky? I thought it was a Texas bourbon.
Yellow Rose is a distillery out of Houston.
Right?
Yeah, they've got a pretty good rye. Yeah. That's one of the Texas Roses. The Yellow Rose rye is one of the things in my Infinity bottle.
Oh, nice. Interesting. I'm sharing out the link and everybody's all like, what are you guys doing? I'm like, we do a thing. I say Tech Dads, come on. Yeah, so I'm not nearly as fancy. I was just doing a Johnny Walker Red, so I'm like, hey, I just decided not to do my bottle. I'm a more peaty guy though. Like I like peat. I like the Scottish and the Irish whiskeys. I like the single malts. I like the barrels. I like that flavor profile. Mm-hmm. So I usually chase after that when I go hunting right now. but that's what I'm looking for. We talked about in a couple episodes past, last episode, when we talk about Asian whiskeys, Japanese, Taiwanese, Korean whiskeys, and their flavor profiles, which kind of expand your profile drinking wise, which are very cool. I was in that space for a bit, but I did not put any in my Infinity bottle, and I'm looking forward to eventually putting them in there. So they were delicious, though.
Yeah, I finally got that Nikki coffee or the Nika coffee grain.
How was it?
Delicious.
Was it smoky? Was it sweet? Like, what did you get out of it?
It's really, really light. Light to the point of almost, I think the alcohol gives it a little bit of an effervescent feel. It's not effervescent, but it's really, really bright and really, really floral. It's got some sweet fruit notes, but more of the like apple and kind of an Irish approach. I don't know. I think like Jameson and Redbreast and some of those kind of come forward with the pear apple flavor, and they can be a little bit more heavy with those fruit flavors. But I felt like Nika was more of a floral first, floral honey, and then apple and pear and that kind of thing.
So fruit in the back, floral in the front. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Fair enough.
Your classical mullet pairing there.
Clearly, sounds like a lovely
Exactly.
flower in the front, party in the back.
Yeah,
Is that
exactly.
another thing? Right.
Exactly.
Clearly.
Well, I think the main thing we wanted to talk about today was co-parenting, right? I mean,
Yep.
I think that's kind of what we can distill that down to. And we're sitting here, all three of us, with three different situations where, that have a lot of overlap, but also have their own unique aspects to it. And I think that so for me, I am a father of two kids. I'm going through a divorce right now, just about done. It's a very amicable divorce where, we're good with each other and we're really keeping the kids first and foremost. And but that does mean that we are splitting time between, the kids are splitting time between two different households at this point in time, and probably will for the foreseeable future. And so that has its own unique challenges, and we can dive into that a little bit more. Corey, you're in a similar situation as well, but with some additional.
So I have a little different. Yeah, I have a little different caveat. So I am also a divorced dad. My ex-wife lives in probably about a half an hour away from where I live. So transportation is always an issue. Making sure that I go with the kids. In my instance, I get them on the weekends. She has them during the week because she's the primary residence. So they get to actually go to school, do everything out in her area. And then for me, they come on the weekends and like, all right, great, now it's vacation time. And I'm like, well, not completely. You still have to clean your room. Sorry. So yeah, it's a little bit of a different situation. I'm also in the situation. My ex-wife just currently got engaged. So, and the guy that she is getting married to, awesome dude, really like him. My kids love him. So like, I'm in that situation. Like this is the guy that she's with, and I get to be like, you cool guy? He's like, yeah, I'm a cool guy. I'm like, all right, moving on. So yeah,
that's all we can ask for, right?
Really,
that's the best case scenario.
Best case scenario. So that's where I'm at right now. So ex-wife, lives a bit far from me. I'm also with somebody else, and so we have four parents in my situation. So that's a lot of parenting going on for two kids. I have a 12-year-old and a 4-year-old, so they're like, okay. They swap names all the time. They call him Pepe and they call me Dad. So they're like, oh, Pepe, I mean Dad, you, the guy that is in the car right now,
man, right there driving. Seat. I need to talk to you.
Yeah, you, the guy in charge at this moment. Can you hand me the water bottle? Is that cool? So it's one of those things.
And are we there yet?
And are we there yet? That's usually the biggest conversation. And Drew, actually, you're in a very interesting situation currently with the co-parenting.
So yeah, we're share parenting, where you've got to figure out the logistics of more than one parent or parent group of a kid. So my wife and I are going through the process of getting foster certified. And so we're going to have foster placements in our home. So we've got 2 biological kids now, and then would have 1 or 2 foster children for a period of time. And they've still got parents, and there's things like visitation and trying to keep the parents in the loop while you're taking care of their children while they get back on their feet or whatever their situation is. So my wife and I still have to collaborate to raise our own kids, but then we're going to have another family that we have to collaborate with and be sure we raise their kids well and give them the that continuing growing up phase while mom and dad get their situation back in order.
The best parenting you could provide in the interim, basically.
Yeah, we got to do our best to make sure those kids get what they need.
So what's interesting for me, and Alan and I can both attest to this, is like, and you actually, we had kids. All 3 of us, we've had kids physically. We made these kids. Ta-da! We have children.
I mean, to be fair, the women in our lives did all of the hard work.
They did all of the hard work.
Listen, fun part of it,
we did the easy and fun parts. That's really what we did. Our job was to just like sustain at that point. What do you need? How can I help you? What can I do?
Make sure everybody stayed fed. Make sure
everybody's happy.
Occasional sleep if possible. Keep the lights on. Let
her rest when she could. Like give her anything that she needed at this point. But in your situation,
do I need to go buy?
How many? Yeah. Ice packs. I get ice packs. Ice, whatever you need. It's 2:00 in the morning. I'll get up. But at the same time, in your situation, Drew, I think it's something extra, right? Is because you have 2 children and you're attempting to foster children, and the hoops that you have to jump through with like the government is amazing. Like outstanding things that you should do that you're like, this is common sense. Do you have a fire extinguisher? Of course, it's under my sink. They're like, oh, okay, great. Do you have this? Are you CPR? Really?
Yeah, they're very specific about the type of fire extinguisher,
right?
Whether actually it is, how it's mounted,
right?
How often it is checked and verified, if it's charged. How many floors do you have? Because you need one upstairs. I mean,
one downstairs is obviously.
Yeah, there are obvious things that you have to have that you'd expect, and then there's all sorts of things that you say, I wonder what the story is behind that rule.
Right, like somebody's done something wrong to make that rule a thing, and that's what I think is interesting, is because you hear all these horror stories about like dads and moms and bad parents that do terrible things with their legitimate children, like their physical children, and then you see these parents that are like, oh, we have kids and we're also foster home kids, and jump through all these hoops, get like we just said, CPR certified, first aid certified, and all this other stuff. And you're like, wow, as an adult, when you have a child, you don't have to go through any of those. But when you have to actually bring some child into your home and actually take care of them, there are rules and regulations.
Yeah, there are no tests for biological children.
Right.
You can get into that mess pretty easy.
Yeah, did you like almost 100% success rate at this point?
The 3 of us have successfully gotten into this.
We have. Yeah, like we were like, oh, surprise, there's this thing that's okay, great. I should make my house childproof thingy, kind of, with a gate.
Well, I mean, I don't know if we've talked about this before on the show, but I remember when we took our oldest son home from the hospital for that first time, it was like, really?
Yeah.
Like, that's it? Like, talk? Like, we're just going to put this kid in the back seat and we're going to go. And
go
that's
get
it.
him. Yeah.
No instructions. They give you a couple pieces of paper. They're all like, hey.
Yeah. Well, that happens every phase. Like all of a sudden you can't just set them there and they'll stay. Oh wait,
yeah.
Where'd they go? You have to go track them down. They start to climb, they start to walk, then run almost
they do things. They become mobile. Yeah. Like they
is
evolve
quickly, and you can only really roll with it as they learn to do things that you weren't ready to parent.
Right. So as a foster parent, which is interesting because the kids that come to you, they have rules that come with them, but not rules that are set by you, not rules that are set by their parents, rules that are set by a governing agency, which I think is incredibly fascinating because they're like, oh, you should have this. And I was like, oh man, should I have had that with my regular kids? Crap. We should do this. Right?
Yeah. So, I mean, some of the things like we have to have all of our stuff that is medical related locked away. So that makes sense. I mean, I don't want kids getting into medicine, especially prescribed medicine that's for a specific person for a specific purpose. Um, some of the things that I learned that I was surprised about is like you have to have any topical cream that is slightly medicated. So like bacitracin or um, whatever that anti-itch cream is, put on mosquito bites, like all that stuff. It's medicine.
Calamine lotion, right?
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
we'll go with that.
If it has a medical purpose, not just like it makes my skin smell good, that has to go like locked up somewhere. And so we have like a big toolbox under a sink that's got all of our medicine in it. And then the toolbox is under the sink, and then the sink has like a magnet lock on the doors to get in. So there's all these additional steps that are probably a good idea, but I didn't have all of my medicine in a locked tool chest before I started this process. They were up high, and I kind of kept an eye on my kids, but
right. Never thought about it.
Kids are also pretty sneaky, and if they really wanted to, they could get in there. I mean, my daughter already goes into the bathroom and is like, "Oh, look, I like Band-Aids," and she'll come out looking like a mummy covered in every Band-Aid we've ever owned and smiling ear to ear. And that's the kind of thing that kids do. So I understand why the state mandates that, but there are a lot of hoops to jump through. We've had all sorts of trainings and medical consenter training. How do you make good decisions on behalf of your foster child? Well, by common sense, asking good questions to doctors.
Yeah.
Okay, but they make you go through and remember, like, okay, just because a doctor prescribes something doesn't mean you say, okay, what are the side effects? What are the other ways I could potentially address this? Are there non-medical intervention behavioral ways I could improve this or that? I mean, there's all those things that we know, but maybe don't think of every time, or you feel like, I'm only gonna get this doctor for 5 minutes, so if they'll give me something that'll help, I'll take it. But they really drive home the point of like, we don't really want the kids that are in state custody and state care to be pumped full of all of these drugs. And if they are, we want them to be very well monitored. We want the person making that decision to understand the implications and to feel like that's really the best way forward. And all these other things that as a parent, I agree with, but going through the coursework, they really pound into your head, like, be sure you ask all the questions, because it's easy to ask the 2 or 3 most obvious, but there are plenty more. There's just a lot of hoops. And so
well, it sounds like a lot of hoops, but I mean, we are talking about some of the kids that need the most help and that are in the most vulnerable positions. You want to make sure that whoever is taking care of them, whether it's for a night or two or for the foreseeable future, you want to make sure that they're going to do a good job of it and that they are prepared for just about anything. Because, I mean, we all know we all have 2 kids, and jumping up from 1 kid to 2 kids changes things. So when you jump from 2 to, however many more, it's going to change things. Now you're playing zone defense, right? Now you've got to watch out, and you're looking out for different things. If you bring in kids that are older than you have yourself, now you have to think about that. You have not seen those, those stages of development yet, and there you are. You're jumping ahead.
Yeah. And so one of the things that you can do is put some boundaries on that. And so what we've decided is that we're not going to have kids older than our oldest. They can be the same age as our oldest, but we'll have them the age of our oldest or younger, up to 2 kids additional, that kind of thing. But it is a big change that with our kids, like, we know a lot of their tells. We know with our son, when he gets hungry, he gets cranky. And with our daughter, it's really more a sleep thing than a food thing. So it's usually pretty easy to get to the bottom of, like, oh, why are you acting that? Okay, yeah, you probably haven't eaten in a while. Let's get you a snack, get your blood sugar up, and you'll be fine. Or you didn't get a nap. I'm just going to have to put up with your grouchiness for the next couple of hours until we can get you to bed. With new kids in the home that we haven't raised from infants, we're going to have to get to know a lot of those things that are already established that they're used to doing that we're not used to seeing and interpreting. And so that'll be certainly a challenge. But then there are also typically kids who came from some sort of trauma, if that's some level of neglect or something more extreme than that. That's going to be something different because my kids haven't gone through the same level of trauma. I mean, they've bumped their knees and been mad at dad for putting them to bed early, but that's a totally different ballgame than what the potential is for a placement in our home. So we're gonna have to learn a lot of that stuff, and probably we've gone through a lot of classes. I mean, we've gone through hours and hours of classes. We've been respite care providers, which is one of the steps prior to full-on foster. It's actually very, very straightforward to be a babysitter, which not overnight, but just like be able to watch kids for a couple of hours while a parent was out on a date or doing something they needed to do for work or whatever. That's actually pretty easy. And if you have the time and bandwidth, that'd be a pretty cool thing to go and get done, because you can really lend a big hand to give parents a break and a breather. Who, I mean, I need a break and a breather now, and I have two. When I have 3 or 4, that's going to be even more extreme. But my wife and I have been in this foster parent process for a long time, but as respite providers, and we've been certified for up to 14 days. So if someone had like a death in the family and had to go out of state all of a sudden, or got into a car wreck and was laid up in the hospital or something along those lines, then we could step in and provide an extended period of care. So we've been able to kind of step in from time to time and help different families in the foster system. It's really kind of nice because we get to be kind of the cool uncle and aunt in that situation, have them for a while, do some fun stuff, and give them back, and experience a little bit of what it would be like, but also have kind of a shortened timeline. Being a foster parent is kind of an indeterminate timeline. Theoretically, we could have them all the way through adoption and then have them join our family full time all the time, but that's for far in the future.
Which is interesting. Yeah, yeah, like I was saying, I was like, that's super interesting. Like that's a okay. We're borrowing this one. We're providing for this one. We're helping with this one. We don't get to keep this one. Moving on. That requires a very specific type of personality.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, we think about how it helps the kids a lot, but I was just thinking about how that would help the grown-ups, because I can see situations where, a parent might be trying to do the things that are necessary to, to be that mom, be that dad that the kids need. And, if you don't have a babysitter to go out and do that job interview, to, to do the things that you need to do, having somebody that can watch those kids, that's certified and is available to do that, that can be a lifeline. That could be a complete and total game changer. And if that's the thing that you need to turn your life around, then and that's all that you get from them, and then that helps to put that parent on the right path, that's great.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of if a parent is in a situation where CPS has stepped in, like CPS provides a lot of different resources and help to get the tools that the parent needs to get their game in top gear, so that they can get their kids back and be ready to continue on with that lifelong process of being a parent. But I mean, even the respite stuff, we've been able to help foster families who, one of the parents is going through surgery, and so the other parent has to both care for the other adult in the situation as well as the kids, and that can be overwhelming. So we've been able to lend a hand then, so that the kids continues to get the standard of care that they need in the interim, and we're able to be a safe place for them to practice having a change of venue, because that's hard already for a kid to be in different places. And that's kind of something I'm curious how you guys handle, since y'all have that. There's 2 main venues, but there's a pretty consistent change of venue that happens, and difference in, what's the rule at dad's house versus what's the rule at mom's house, and how do you handle some of those kind of back and forth and re-educations?
So this is a very good point. Alan, do you want to go first? Or you want me to go first?
Well, I'll go first really quickly because it's newer for me, right? So I've been doing this for about 3 or 4 months, and that's not terribly much time, and it's a thing that we're all learning together, and communication for us has been the key, right? So I keep in contact with my kid's mom on a daily basis, right? So my kids aren't old enough to call me on their own, so we're still in communication, at least for that nightly phone call, nightly video chat. We keep up to date on the happenings at school all the time. So not that it's an issue, but if one of the kids thinks that they can slip something past, one parent or the other, or try to slip something past both parents from school, like we both know about it. We're both going to be in there on that. So we keep in constant contact on those things, and just if there's any type of behavioral issue, if there's any type of hey, this happened, they've lost this privilege for a while, that's always communicated so that it doesn't fall over. And to me, like, so far, communication has been the big thing. There's obviously the change is happening, right? So it's a big change for everybody, and that's tough. And my kids are 7 and 4, and they're really starting to sink in now. Okay, this is a permanent situation, and that's pretty tough. That's pretty tough. But they're kids. They're strong. They're resilient. They're doing a good job, and they're doing a good job of making the most out of the situation.
So they adapt. They're younger. They acknowledge what's going on. They're like, oh, this is a thing. This is how this works. And I agree 100% with you. Communication is key. I'm going on almost my 2nd year of being divorced. And even with the divorce process and everything that was going on, communication has always been key. Like, put all your frustrations aside, put everything to the side. Yeah, you're hurt. She's hurt. Everybody's hurt. But at the same time, you're doing the best which you can for the kids, and you go through that process. And that's super important, because you have to take a step back and go, it's not for me, it's for them. And that's huge, because that's how they're going to respond going forward, right?
Well, and I've got 2 boys, and 90% of the way that they treat women in the future is going to come from the way that I treat women. And the most important woman in their life, and right now, honestly, the most important woman in my life is her, the mother of my kids. And if I can be a good role model and treat her well, regardless of anything that's happened in the past, like, it's a great way for me to be a positive role model on how to treat women well. And I think that'll go a really long way.
And that, I also see that same thing I have a 12-year-old daughter. Well, I say 12, she'll be 12 in December. She's 11 years old right now, but she's an 11-year-old daughter. So she sees how I treat her mother. So she sees those interactions. She sees what happens. And in the beginning, there was a lot of frustration. There was a lot of arguing. There was a lot of upset, discontent. And we both were like, oh, we can't do this because they're watching. Like, we have to be like, the kids are always watching. So you always have to be present, and everything that you say and you do, they absorb that. Even if you're not thinking about it, it still sticks with them. So we both decided, like, this is how we're going to do this, and this is how we're going to agree on it, and we moved on. And it's been the most beneficial thing that we both did going forward. It's great for the kids. It's great for my relationship with her. Like, it's fantastic. Like, I text my ex-wife to say, hey, congratulations, you got engaged. That's fantastic. My daughter calls me. She's like, oh my God, Mom got engaged. Oh, and I was like, I'm so excited. She's like, oh, I'm so excited too. And like, we like have that moment. And then she's like, okay, I got to go to bed. I'm like, all right, love you, bye. And that's it. That's all that happens. But I'm not angry. I'm not bitter. I'm legitimately trying to enjoy that moment with my kid and let her be excited for what's happening in her life. And that's a huge step for those kids, for my kids, for those kids, those kids, those guys. Yeah, it's interesting. You really look at what your actions do with them, and how you respond to them. And like Drew said earlier, is that how do you do that with like 2 homes, right? When they go to one side, when they come back to the other, when they have to transition back and forth. In my situation, I have the kids during the weekends. I get them Friday nights, and then I take them back on. Actually, my ex-wife comes and gets them on Sunday night. We have a couple instances where we like kind of extend weekends. I have a cruise coming up, so she'll get them 2 weekends. We do 2 weekends in the 2 weeks in the summer, where I get them in for a couple weeks, and she gets them for a couple weeks, and then we go back to our normal schedule. It's great, but communication is key. I show up to the house. I go to pick up the kids. My ex-wife looks at me and she goes, "Hey, so-and-so is grounded." And I was like, "Oh, what did she do?" And she's like, "Oh, she did this, that, the other. This is not acceptable behavior. Just wanted to let you know." And I'm like, "Oh, not okay. Guess what? You're also grounded at my house." She's like, "Oh, I thought I could do all the things and play on the iPad and do the Xbox." And I was like, "No, you don't get to do anything because mom grounded you, and I really get to ground you because this is your weekend off." Recently, with all the hurricanes that just came up and all the long rains and whatever, we had a rainy day weekend we talked about in the last podcast, and my daughter came home, and when I picked her up, my ex-wife told me, she's like, "She's grounded." And I was like, "On a rainy weekend?" She's like, "Yeah." And she explained the situation as what happened, and I looked at her and I was like, "Oh, she's grounded." And my daughter was crushed. She was like, "This is the best weekend not to be grounded." And I was like, but you did bad. So you don't get
that earlier.
Should have thought about that, like weather forecast. Probably should have planned on not doing what you did and enjoyed your weekend. So like communication is always key. Just make sure that what you do, you tell the other parents. What you do, you tell the other couple, whatever. You explain the situation and say, "Hey, I did this because X, Y, and Z. And I made them aware of it, and I'm making you aware of it." Yeah. And you say, "You can proceed as you want, but I would suggest X, Y, and Z." And then they go, "Oh yeah, totally." Right? Like if your son came home and like was failing a class in high school, and he was like, "Dad, I want to play Overwatch on Xbox," and you're like, "Nope." And he's like, but mom let me do it on Wednesday. And were you grounded on Wednesday? No. You're grounded today. But Dad, no, you're grounded. That's how it goes. You have to share that responsibility. You have to make sure that it's enforced on both houses. And as long as it always is, they understand that the parents are always in communication. They understand that those actions have consequences across all environments, whether it's school, parents, mom's house, dad's house. The consequences stay because you did something ridiculous. That is a key point. And that, Drew, I think is also, and it's always ridiculous. It's always something stupid. And you're like, really? That's how you ruined your weekend? Because you did this? This is it? Oh, dude, the rainy weekend, I was disappointed. I was like, I just want to hang out on my freaking computer and hang out with you guys in the living room. And just like, my son could play on the Kindle. My daughter could play on the iPad. My girlfriend was going to hang out and watch some shows. I was going to play video games. And then my daughter got grounded. And I was like, you just threw a wrench in our whole weekend. Good job. And she's like, I didn't know. And it didn't affect her actually until she came to my house, which I thought was very interesting. She shows up to the house. And so she leaves her mom's house, and I pick her up, and her mom's like, "Yeah, she's grounded because she can't have electronics." I was like, "Oh yeah, she's totally grounded." And the ex-wife's like, good. So like I put her in the car, we go home, she doesn't get any electronics, and then and she's like, "Oh, let's go to get dinner." And I was like, "All right," we go get dinner, we bring it home, we sit down, we eat. And my daughter goes, "Hey, can I get 30 minutes on the iPad?" And I'm like, "No, you're grounded."
You remember?
No, I was like, remember, a few hours ago we had this conversation. Mom said you were grounded, so therefore I agree and say you're grounded. And she goes, "Oh, that sticks." And I'm like, yeah. And she burst into tears and she cried. "I didn't know it was gonna go through the weekend. I didn't know." And I'm like, no, you're done. Like, you're grounded. That's what happens. You made a mistake. It's one household. I don't care that it's two houses.
Locations.
Sure.
Different
Absolutely.
Boys, different people.
Still one household.
Rules. Yep.
Yeah. Last year I still post a picture every October. It was actually me and my girlfriend and my ex-wife and her boyfriend and her fiance actually, and we went trick-or-treating, and we actually decided on like the group. It was a comic book makeup. So I dressed up as Superman, my girlfriend dressed up as Wonder Woman, my ex-wife was Robin, and her boyfriend was Batman. and my daughter was Catwoman, and my son was Spider-Man, and we had like a great group picture. Yeah, and listen, Alan, don't like there.
The Marvel crossover into the
no,
like,
it hurt. It hurt.
I know.
It still hurts to this day. Every time the picture comes up, and I'm like, oh yeah, like that's yay us.
Never
and I'm like,
Marvel characters.
there's a lot of crisscross happening there, and it hurts. It hurts my geek pride, but at the same time, we all came together. We all went trick or treating together, and we all had the same rules. We all walked the houses. We trick or treated together. We had a good time. We worked, we communicated, and we made things happen. And the kids had a great Halloween, and they will tell that story for the rest of their lives. So my recommendation, Drew, is that you always talk to the parents. You always talk to the other situational environment and say, hey, we're doing this. Do you have feedback? If you do have feedback, let me know. If you want us to do something different, let us know. Let's all be on the same page because it's the most beneficial option for the kids. That's really what it comes down to.
The communication options are.
You're right. That's my thing.
Situational. I mean,
right. Because if somebody's having surgery, you can't really be like, so, hey, I know you're on a bed and I know you're probably like mostly drugged up. But like he ran down the stairs and he may have hurt himself. How do you feel about that? Like you can't really go along those lines. You have to draw a line somewhere, right? As a parent.
So it's a little bit easier from a respite provider situation because we get to have like the conversation when the drop off or pickup happens, if we're going to pick them up or if they're dropping them off or whatever. And okay, so what's the schedule look like? What are they used to? Do they nap? That kind of thing. And get that picked up. But once we get into the foster situation, it's really going to be situational. So it may be a couple weeks before we even get a chance to interact at all with the biological parents. It's the kind of thing that'll probably be really useful to get, like, do they have any favorite foods? Can we get an idea for some of the other preferences that maybe we haven't uncovered yet? Like he or she's not eating as much as we thought they would when our kids were that age, or, whatever the case may be.
And you're looking at so many different situations, right? So you have the situation where you're doing the, a couple of hours to 14 days, right? That's a whole different situation than for the foreseeable future. And that's a whole different situation. And so, I imagine that there are going to be many different types of communication.
It's going to be, it's different, right? It's a transition. It's one of those things like, oh, I'm not in my room. I'm somewhere else's house. I'm some other person's house. This is new. How do I adjust? What am I doing? There's a lot of questions when you're younger that you take for granted when you're older, right? Like you either are established, you're not established, you have a specific timeline. You're a military kid, right? And you move from place to place to place to place, and you have different schools, place to place to place to place, and you go to different bases, place to place to place to place, and your parents always move, blah 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 blah, and then you have a stable location, and you go, what? Like these things, this is new.
I was like getting itchy 4 years in. That's weird. I'm trying to.
Yeah, like I don't want to stay here anymore. I'm ready to move. And everybody's like, why are you ready to move? I have no idea.
You got a good situation. You got a job. Yeah. You got everything.
Yeah, like you have everything that you need. Why do you want to leave? And you're like, I mean, like it's just natural. I'm ready to go. And that happens. And that becomes habit. That becomes how you're formulated. So to have a child move from house to house to house, back and forth, they learn trust in other people. They learn responsibility with other people. They learn what is it? I need a word, and I'm going to get it here in a minute. It's ownership, right? How they act, how they perform, the integrity. That's what I want. They want integrity. What they do at one house also reflects on the other house. What they do in one place also reflects on another place. My mother had always the greatest line in the world. She's like, I don't care how my kids act in public. My kids act in private, but in public, they should be respectful. So my mom never gave a crap at the house. We always were just like rambunctious. We went out in the backyard. We wrestled. We beat the crap out of each other. Always happened. We were in Taekwondo, so we were like, oh, sparring matches. We tried to kill each other 90% of the time. Happened all the time. but the minute we were in public, we stopped. And we were like, we are representing our family. We have this, everything is fine. Everything, hello, mother. Hello, father. Thank you so much. Everything is fine. I'll have a dollop of that. That'd be lovely. A little bit of, yes, I'll have some milk, please. Yes, no, don't need to warm it. Everything is fine. Very chilled. Cheers, mate. That was it. Like, we were always appropriate in public. And everybody was like, you have great kids. And she always said, they're great in public. And that's all that matters. And that was it. That was it. So
someday I too will have kids that are great in public.
They don't start that way, Drew. You have to mold them.
We're slowly
it takes time,
wearing them in all the right places.
It does, yeah. Wearing them in all the right places. Yeah, just like a boot. You're like, you come here. Like, stop it.
I'm telling you the same thing, and I feel like eventually it's gonna sink in. So
and it will
keep telling you the same.
You know what's great? That is the perfect hashtag dad life like moment, is because you say the same thing over and over and over and over, and then the one time you stop and they do it, and you go, holy shit, and like you have the moment of like, they did it. And there was no influence. You didn't have to say anything. You didn't have to scold them. You didn't have to like reprimand them. You didn't have to remind them. It just naturally happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're like, I did that. Y'all see that? And it's something stupid. It's always something very simple. But at the same time, you're like, I did it. Did you see that? Did you see that? Somebody, where's your phone? Just record it, post it, make a GIF. Like, that's what happens. That's dad life is what it is.
One of my favorite things is with my son, because he's old enough to kind of figure it out, and he's seen a lot of the rhythms that happen in our family. He's starting to pick those things up, but he does need some prompting and some prodding. And so I'll pull him aside and I'll be like, hey, what does mom always ask you to do every night? Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, go lay out your clothes for tomorrow.
Do that.
Shh. If you go right now before dinner, you lay out your clothes, just lay them out and don't say anything. Wait for mom. She's going to say, every night she says it. Then when she says, Cole, go lay out your clothes, you're done. You say, mom, I already did it. And how cool will that be when you can say, mom, I already got that. We're good.
Right?
We can conspire like that and jog his memory so he gets to do the good thing and be the guy who remembers. That's fantastic. He feels awesome. He's just waiting for that moment for my wife to say, hey, you need to go do that thing. I tell you
Yep.
Did it, Mom.
I already did it. I'm done. So
he's got a smile on his face so big when he's ready. He's just locked and loaded. He's waiting for her to say it.
So on the negative side of that point, like where they always try to like misbehave and they always try to push limits. My girlfriend, Casey, her mother had the greatest line ever. If you embarrass me, I get to embarrass you. And I'm like,
that's classic parenting right there.
That's good parenting. That's legitimately like, hey, listen, if you want to act a fool, I will do the same. Because kids, and it doesn't affect them at like 5, 6, or 7. Like they're like, yeah, whatever. It's like, mom, you're silly, blah, 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 blah. But when my daughter's 11 years old, and I'm like, you want to act a fool? Nah, let me act a fool too. And she's like, no, Dad, don't. Shh, Dad, stop. No, I was like, no, you did it. I get to do it too. Do you want to do something ridiculous out in public? Hold on, let me dab in my sandals. Let's do this. Yeah, is this the game that we're playing? Like, let's do this if you want to be raw. Like, let's go. And the kid's like, no, stop. And I was like, then next time, make a better choice. That's what it is. Choose wisely. That's all it is. Yeah, man. Kids are responsive. And then the older they get, it gets better. The older they get, because they're like, no, Dad, stop. No, I need to bring it down.
My mom would make us hold hands if we couldn't get along. Okay, fine. You guys are out in public and you guys are fighting. Hold hands with each other for 5 minutes. And we're walking along in the mall, like having to hold hands with each other, and just the most. And that happened like twice, and it was done. Like it never happened again. It's one of those things that worked very well and just seared that behavior into our subconscious.
Yeah, because you can't be like the 16-year-old kid and your mom looks at me like, hold your brother's hand. You're like, oh no. I'm like, I can't. People know me here. Like,
I need to go home right now.
Yeah, Mom, I'm done. I don't need pants. I don't need boxers. It's cool. My underwear with 3 holes in it. It's fine. It's cool. It's all right. I'll just work through it. It's fine.
I'm willing to take the first shoes I can find that fit, and we're going home.
Yeah, it's fine. I can cram my foot in shoes. By the way, kids grow too fast. Can we be clear about that? Right?
Yeah, no argument here. That's yeah. They grow way too fast.
So I bring this up because
alternatively, you could have them in your house forever.
So I get my kids every weekend, and you get that nostalgic moment with the father or the mother or whatever. Oh my God, you're so big, you're growing up so fast. I'm like, but every week, my son comes back and I'm like, dude, your shoes. And he's like, yeah, they're a little tight. I'm like, they were tight. Not last week. And he goes,
replaced them last week because
I was like, we just bought these. We just bought pants. We just bought shirts. They're a little tight. And I'm like, what are you benching? Are you like doing a keto diet and being all protein and muscle right now? Because you're 4. Daughter's the same way. She's all legs. So she just like burns through pants. And I'm like, oh my God, I need better pant sizes. I don't know what to do with that. I try to keep up. And that's interesting for you, Drew and Alan. You can contest to this because when you get the kids, you're like, oh, you showed up in an outfit. That's really cool. Let's put this outfit on from last week. It doesn't fit anymore. What just happened? And then Drew, the same way with you. Like you're going to get these foster children that come to you and be like, oh, you're so huge. Right? Like how do you handle that situation? Not even monetarily, just like upkeep with children.
So we've been lucky enough so far to have a network of people with clothes, and we have a boy and a girl. So at least to a degree, we have some clothes laying around for a boy that's, well, my son's a beanpole. He's a tiny waif of a child. He's tall and long. So we have clothes that will fit him all the way down. And then we have a daughter who's an average size 3-year-old girl. But we have a cousin who's my son's age. So we have access to clothes that would fit someone at least the size of our kids and smaller. If we get somebody bigger, I'm waiting for good ideas.
I mean, that's all you can do is just try to keep up with it. And this is one of the questions that I'm trying to come to terms with. I mean, I mentioned we've been doing this for about 3 or 4 months now, the co-parenting thing. And so over the summer, I would have them for a week or 2 at a time. And that was great. You know, they stayed here, they unpacked their suitcase and they'd stay here and play here and everything was great. Now it's the every other weekend thing. And like you said, Corey, they can grow in 2 weeks and be completely out of clothes. And so I don't know whether to invest in a wardrobe for here or to just rely on trying to logistically transport both children and clothing via the public school system from one home to another. So there's a whole bunch of things that I need to work out what's going to work. And right now, again, we're just trying to play it by ear to figure out, who is going to keep the clothes where. Should I invest in clothes? I mean, I think some of the things, socks and underwear, are going to kind of be okay for a while, but shoes are one of those things that they outgrow so fast, and they're a fairly significant investment each and every time that you have to get them. I'm not sure what to do on that. So, any advice from the guy that's been there for a couple more years than I have?
Shoes, socks, underwear, priorities. You know why? Because the ex will always send the child in clothes that fit. And you're like, yes. Oh, that's good. And then you're like, strip all those off and I'll wash them. And then like at the end of the time with the kid, you're like, put them back on because they fit. Oh, and great. But the underwear, it fits. It may not fit at the end of the week. Socks, maybe. Like it's a crapshoot at that point. I do the same thing. My ex-wife sends the kid in clothes, and she sends them in usually clothes that are like he'll grow into. Like he puts them on.
That's all he's doing is growing.
He's just growing, and I'm like, oh, it's prep clothes. Got it. So, but I don't want to send him back in the same outfit. So I'm always like, I have an outfit that he can wear, but always underwear, socks, always priority. I'm like, as long as those fit, they can go back and forth constantly. Good to go. The clothes, they may be a little short. She'll throw out some outfits. I'll throw out some outfits based off size, but always underwear, socks, priority. Girl or boy, don't care. And now my daughter is 11 years old. Like she has bras now, and I'm like, oh, okay. I need to buy bras now. So I got bras, I got underwear, and I got socks. I was like, got it. I call my ex. I messaged my ex. I'm like, so is that a thing? What size are we at right now? I'm a guy. I don't even know how to shop for this right now.
You've ever purchased.
I don't know what to do. I have a daughter who's 11 years old, and she's adapting. She's evolving, and I'm like, what size do you wear? And then she's like, I don't know. Text mom, and I'm like, Mom, I don't know what's happening. And I text her the thing. It's impressive. Casey, my girlfriend, has been incredibly helpful with all of this process because I'm not prepared for any of it with a daughter. So I'm just trying to adapt. I'm just trying to evolve. We go back to the whole conversation almost like 20 minutes ago. Communication is always key. Talk to the other parent. Always be like, what do I do? Or like, I don't know what to do here.
And that's the thing, it's for me at least, there was ample opportunity to rage and be angry and do and say mean things. Could have absolutely happened. And, it was definitely a choice and sometimes a difficult choice to not do that. But the fact of the matter is, like, this is, we've got another 20 years or so before they're really lifting, spreading their wings and are gone and doing their own thing. And so, we have to keep those lines of communication open. There's going to be so many things that are happening. My ex-wife is going to be raising 2 boys on her own, right? She had a brother that died in infancy and an older sister, right? So she did not grow up around boys. All of the adolescence and the puberty stuff, that's going to have to come from me, or, if she's remarried by that time, I'm sure that person will help out. But, at this point, it's me. It's all on me. And, we're going to have to be in very good communication throughout that entire time.
So in that instance, like, now that my ex-wife is going, she's engaged, I'm like, we have another male figure. So like him and I have to stay in contact too. Like, what are we doing? We're talking about like, hey, where are you at with this? Where am I with this? I have a question. And we even meet up, and like, I'll go get the kids, and he's there, and he's like, oh, your ex-wife is at work. Hey, here are the kids. They're all just ready to go. And I'm like, hey, I have a couple questions. Are you seeing X, Y, and Z? And he's all like, yeah, dude, what is going on? I'm like, I don't know. Let's talk about this real quick. And we like kind of like sit in the car. Kids, sit in the car, make it happen. And I think that, Drew, that's one of those things that you're going to have to do, is that you're going to either have situations where the parent is present or the parent is not present. So it's going to be, hey, let's discuss this, or Google foo. Even if you do like same age range, you also have a lot of obscurities that could show up as a foster parent. And that's interesting for me to, how do you handle that? Like, how do you address those issues or those questions or things that you're not necessarily prepared for because your kids necessarily didn't do that?
Well, we do have a decent network, so we work through so there's CPS.
Yes, you also know some guys like me and Alan.
Yeah, I've got friends who've
got guys.
Things.
Yeah.
And then we've got an agency that we work with that's got a bunch of experience with way more than the 1 or 2 kids that we'll have at a time. We'll be able to have some interaction during visitations and court dates and stuff like that with the biological parents. So that'll be a combination of those things. One of the trying to track back, my brain was one place when I answered that question. Now I got to get back to that place where my brain used to be.
Welcome back.
It's gone. It's gone, but it will come back, and I will track it down.
No, we'll be there. We'll be here for you.
Appreciate that.
No problem. Yeah, shared parenting is a very interesting concept. It's not something that's discussed a lot. We get a lot of the happy hunky dory family life things. A lot of cable shows, a lot of networking shows are all about either mixed parenting or deconstructed parenting, which is very interesting, but it doesn't really highlight the minimalist piece, the minutia that happens on a day-to-day basis, the questions and concerns, the phone calls at night, like what really happens at 8 o'clock at night. We're like, hey kiddo, call me when you, dear so-and-so, would you have the kids call me tonight for bed? And they're like, hey, I mean, you're like, how was your day? Blah, 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 blah. They kind of give you an overview. Everything was great for the week. And then you get them on Friday and they're like, oh, we're grounded. And I'm like, what?
Here's the real story.
And I'm like,
okay,
I just talked to you for like 4 days and everything was fine. They're like, yeah.
That fifth day.
And that fifth day is so rough. Friday is so hard these days. But it's one of those things like that's kind of the thing that's an oversight. And it's the minutia that really, really grates on you as a parent. And that's get through it. Patience, communication, and just relying on your other peers and other people that have been through this, or even those that don't have, accept that conversation and just have an outlet. That's really what it comes down to. Have an outlet and go, oh my God, they're so cute, but I want to kill them. Like, it's a defense mechanism. They're adorable so that you don't kill them. That's really what it is. Like, that's how kids survive to be like 18. So yeah, man, I don't know. It's an interesting dynamic. It's more common these days, and not a lot of people talk about it. And those that do, take the advice. Not always keep it to heart, but like adjust to what your situation is. Most definitely. We have 3 different caveats here today, and all of us are getting through it. And again, one of the biggest conversation pieces is communication. That's huge. Always communicate.
Yeah, especially as more people get a say in what happens with your kids.
Yep.
So
always a priority. Always a priority. Just communicate. It's not about you. It's not about them. It's not about the situation. It's about them. It's about the kids.
Raising kids right.
Raising kids right. Making them
every opportunity.
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And scene.
We covered a lot. That was
wait. That's all I had. I didn't have anything. I was like, was that not it? I was like, and then I did the Kermit the Frog drink.
Well done.
None of my business.
Yeah, that was good. That's good stuff.
Well, thanks for letting us
complain for an hour. Not complain.
Not complain.
Discuss.
Discuss. This is good
There's
stuff.
definitely some commiseration. I mean,
this is a legitimate open forum.
It's really hard work to raise kids.
It really is.
It never stops. So,
and I mean, look, we're 3 guys that are committed to being dads and not just fathers, and we have various situations that have some overlap amongst them. And it's really interesting to see the different things. I mean, awesome. Corey, you've been a very good help for me. I mean, you've been a sounding board for me on some of the relationship issues, and as I move into this co-parenting part, you're again a great role model for me in this. So, I mean, it's been great to have. Drew, I think you're a fantastic father as well, and so it's great to have this network of people we can talk to and work. So that's kind of what we wanted to do whenever we started this thing a couple years ago. Just talk about the things that we do as dads and things that work and some things that don't work, and what we can do to make it better.
Yeah, I think we need to have a hashtag of just like the biggest question I get from a lot of new dads are like, how did you do it? Like, what did you do? How did you make it this far? And I'm like,
a man loves a woman very, very much.
Very much. And there's a book about it. I could find you the book at whatever. Yeah, man, it's just one of those things. Like, it's a process. It's a working process. Hang in there. I promise it gets better.
Well, it's hard sometimes.
It's hard. It is hard sometimes, but just hang in there. I promise you it's worth it. Will do.
And it gets worse, and then it gets better again.
It does.
It gets worse again, and then
it's a roller coaster
again. And at the end of the day, you can look up and feel like you've made some progress.
Yep.
Even if you lost ground that day, you can look back and say, "Yeah, but look where we came from. And look at how much they've picked up."
Yep.
And we're going to have to go at it again tomorrow, but I'll see you in the morning. Good night.
I will tell you a story. I will tell you before we end this podcast. I have a quick story. So my girlfriend Casey, she since she's been in my life, she has always said, "You guys need the kids. We have two rules. We have one rule. We have one rule. One rule. Rule number one: don't die. That is rule number one. I don't care whatever else you get at school.
That's good.
Like you don't whatever you get from daycare." Whatever happens, break arms, bust your ribs, blow air out of your face. Like, I don't care what happens. Rule number one, don't die. She also has a thing that she inherited from her parents on the East Coast, which was don't hit your kukaluka. And when I started dating her, I was like, what is a kukaluka? She's like, it's your head. Don't hit your head. It's your most important piece of your body. Don't hit your head. Don't bump your kukaluka. So my son, who is a ravager. Like he just wants to jump on things, flip on couches, do gymnastics everywhere, taekwondo. And I'm like, dude, chill, breathe, stop. And my girlfriend pretty much told him, like, don't bump your kukaluka. And he's like, okay. So every time he did something and he made a mistake, he'd be like, Casey, I bumped my kukaluka. And she'd be like, are you okay? Is everything okay? He's like, yeah, it's cool. I'm a little sore right now. We would go to parks and we would go play. And recently I went to a park with my friend and my son was climbing on monkey bars and he's 4 years old. So he's like 2 feet off the ground. And he was like, I'm doing all these tricks. And I was like, you're going to fall. And he's like, but I can. And I'm like, you're going to fall. He's like, I'll be fine. 30 minutes into it, he jumped across and he fell. And he like fell on his arm. And he's like, ah. And he got up and he started crying. And I got down and I looked him in the eyes and I said, what's rule number one? And he looks at me and he goes, don't die. And I'm like, did you die? I was like, he goes, no. I'm like, are you hurt? And he's like, my arm hurts. And it was funny because like all the parents looked at me like I was a jerk. And I was like, no. Rule number one. What's rule number one? He's like, I didn't die. So I picked him up and I put him in and sat him down. I gave him a break and I was like, are you okay? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, kids fall. It's going to happen. But that was it. Rule number one, you didn't die. And he goes, I'm okay. And I was like, do you want to do the same monkey bar thing? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, you just fell. I'm like, what is wrong with it? And he goes, I won't do it this time. And I looked at him and I was like, rule number one. And he goes, don't die. And I'm like, can you go play on something else? And he's like, yeah. And then he went play on something else. And I was like, that is a great rule. Like it failed eventually. He hurt himself. He came back and he's all like, if I do this again, I might die. He wasn't going to die. He was just going to fall on the freaking wood chips again and bust his arm and I'd have to take him to the hospital. He was going to survive, but like he now has the whole thing in his mentality of rule number one, don't die. We go swimming and we go with friends and he says the same thing. I'm like, I look at him, my daughter, 11 years old. Rule number one, she looks at me, she goes, don't die. And I'm like, good, play. It's a good rule.
Make good decisions.
That's really what that rule is for. Make good decisions. Don't die. That's like the worst decision.
Predict the future that your son was going to fall in the monkey bars. I don't understand how you're able to see that eventuality.
Oh, dude, it was great. So we have to end this podcast here in a minute. But so my son is standing at the monkey bars and he's doing this BS. He's hanging on the monkey bars. He jumps up and he puts his leg on the monkey bars and he's like, whoa, I'm so cool. And all the kids are like, oh, so daredevil. And I look at him and I'm like, you're going to fall. And he's like, no, I'm not dead. There's no way. And then he like jumps back down and he's like, see? And I was like, oh, and you're cocky? Winter is coming, son. Winter is coming. So he jumps up, like he puts his legs up again. He's like, see, I'm so cool. And all the kids are like, oh, he's such a daredevil. And he puts it down. And I look at him and I'm like, rule number one. And he goes, don't die. And I was like, yeah. And then he went to jump and he grabbed the second bar and he missed. and he fell. And I looked at him, and all the parents, the minute he hit the ground, all the parents did the and there was silence across the playground. Nobody said a word. Nobody said anything. All was quiet. And I looked upon the child, and the blonde-haired child looked upon the ground, and he looked up at me, and he said, "But Dad," and I said, "But no. Rule number 1." And he said, "Don't die." That was it. That was the conversation that we had. It was like Hamlet, and like everybody and their mother was like, "Oh my God, that child." And I was like, "No, he's fine. He literally has not hurt himself. He made a poor choice, and he did not follow rule number 1."
And every parent here knew that was going to happen.
And we all did. Like,
kid.
That's it. And you were all, and every parent was shocked when it happened. And I feel like it was a little judged. Like, everybody looked at me like, "Oh, you should go up and pick him up and cuddle." I was like, no. He broke rule number 1. He almost died. That was rule number 1. Don't die. That's it. That's all you had to follow. And you almost broke that rule. And I looked at him and I was like, "Son,
quit trying to break rule number 1.
You tried to break rule number 1." And I picked him up and I sat him down, and he cried. "Oh, my arm hurts." And I looked at him and he just cried. And I gave him a good 2 minutes of crying. And I looked at him and I was like, "What is rule number 1?" And he goes, "Don't die." And I was like, "How's your arm?" And he's like, "I mean, it's okay." And I was like, "It was okay, right?" And then he proceeded to ask to do it again. And I was like, "You can't do it again because you're going to break rule number 1 because you almost died just now." And he's all like, "Fine." And then he went and played on the slide and he was over it. But it's one of those things, like, you have to just reinforce those things. But rule number 1, don't die. That is it. That is a great rule. I feel that should be taught in schools. Like, rule number 1, don't die.
The list in schools is much longer than that.
The list in schools is much longer than that, but they also have a lot of outside resources that happen. So we have to kind of like affiliate those. But yeah, rule number 1, don't die. I feel that should be the topic of the conversation is hashtag don't die. Rule number 1, don't die.
There you go. Well, that seems like a good place to wrap it up. Corey, Drew, it's always fantastic to chat with you guys. And I think we had a very deep conversation this time around. And I really appreciate you all being sounding boards and co-conspirators on this.
Yeah. Oh, conspirators. Ooh. Hashtag conspirator dad. No, I really actually appreciate this conversation because there's been a lot of changes in my life recently. So I'm very excited to have this conversation with you guys and other dads. And I look forward to other people chiming in and saying their comments and their stories and their rules with their kids and just discussing as being a dad, because being a dad is hard. Being a mom is harder, but being a family is like difficult. But if you bring it all together, it makes a beautiful thing. So
worthwhile. Hard work, worthwhile.
By far. Put the work in. Benefits always outmatch the work.
Absolutely. Okay, let's do this again.
Let's do it again in a couple of weeks or so.
Sounds good.
Not in a quarter.
We're fine. We're back on a cadence-ish.
We're back on a cadence. Yeah, next week. I'll see you guys next week.
I think we need 3 to make it a pattern. It's not a habit.
Three will make it a pattern.
Yep.
3 is a magic number.
It is. All right, guys. Let's go ahead and sign off. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you sometime.
Eventually.